Without further ado, here's my interview with the great Jay Epstein.
Do it, really.
Yeah. So you've always played.
Yes.
Has playing always been your full-time thing?
Adam, I've never had a day job.
That's killing.
I've never. And when I mean, the only jobs I ever really had in life, I mean, I have a teaching degree in math and chemistry. I thought I was going to fall back on teaching, or at least substitute teaching or something. But no, the only jobs I ever had were when I was a kid, delivering newspapers and being a pin setter in a bowling alley.
Sure,
to
nice.
Finance
Yeah, awesome.
my first drum set.
Wow.
Other
So
than
did
that,
you grow up here?
I grew up in Winona,
Okay.
Minnesota, relatively small town, but there was a really good college professor that was a jazz player. He ran the Winona State College big band.
Yeah.
And right away when I was a freshman in high school, he kind of took me under his wing because I loved his music. He knew that.
Yeah.
And number two, I had already been immersed in a lot of music, a lot of jazz that I was attracted to.
Cool.
I mean, honestly, I didn't have any chops or or anything, but I had a decent swing beat, and that's all he cared about.
Sure.
For doing lots of gigs. So I right away when I was a freshman, sophomore, I was playing every weekend with these older guys, 40s and 50s and 60s that have been in big bands in the big band era of the 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
So these guys all kind of took me under their wing, thankfully.
Yeah. Awesome. So you started playing, that's high school, or because the director there is at the university, but you were playing on the weekends.
Yeah, I was playing all the weekends.
I don't remember ever playing gigs. I mean, like occasionally in high school,
Yeah.
some people would organize some things, but that seems...
No, I told my band director at my high school I couldn't play in the marching band and make formations on the football field anymore because I had gigs.
That's awesome.
on the weekends.
Yeah. So you went to school for math?
Yeah.
And didn't go to school for music. Did you study music at all while you were in school?
Only I just played in the bands and orchestras and college big band then. No, I'm mostly self-taught. When I used to be for a while I lived in Hollywood, California when I was with this rock band Gypsy, and I took lessons from a guy named Roy Hart. He was a really good bebop drummer that owned a drum shop there called Drum City. And then when I moved to Minneapolis, I took a few lessons with Marv Dahlgren, famous jazz educator and percussionist that wrote Four-Way Coordination, one of our little Bibles.
Okay.
And then I studied, I was in New York for a while, and I studied with Barry Altschul, a drummer in Chick Corea's Circle with Anthony Braxton and Dave Holland. Barry was playing with those guys and other a little more freer kind of grouping of people. But I was intrigued at that time. I'd been studying all my bebop drum kinds of things, but I was also intrigued with freer kinds of playing too. And not that you have to take lessons to do that, but there's some people that can somehow bring out some gorgeous things in a little freer element than others. Some guys just don't. They're either too bombastic or they're not listening enough to the other guys, and so I was more intrigued with that kind of gray area of drumming and I pursued that for a little while.
So let's talk timeline. Like,
sure,
Hollywood, California. When are we talking?
69, 70, 71.
Okay.
I lived in Hollywood, and even though I was playing a lot of rock shows with this rock band, I on all my nights off, of course, I ran over to Shelley's Manhole,
yep.
which is a famous jazz club in Hollywood. It was only about a mile from my house, and so I was there a lot of nights, all my off nights, and there's another place called the Lighthouse in Hermosa Beach, and I hung
Were you
out
sitting
there.
in jam sessions or just going to hear music?
A couple of little jam sessions, but I wasn't really making a lot of jazz connections there at all, because this other thing took up all of my time.
The rock band.
Yes, they had.
So, what kind of success was the rock band having? Were you guys touring a lot?
Yeah.
Wow. So what was that? What was that like touring in the 60s,
well, we had
60s,
a big old school bus painted red, white, and blue, and it would tour around the country playing concerts, and that seemed to attract a lot of gendarmes all around the country, because we had long hair, and it was obvious that we were hooligans, but then for 2 years we were the house band at the Whiskey A Go Go, a famous rock club in Hollywood, and so I was playing there a lot of nights out of the week, and we would do the opening set for name bands, lots of name bands.
Did you guys ever headline us? Oh, B.B. King, you opened
King
for.
Crimson, the Kinks, Albert King, Little Richard, who played for, at that time.
Did you hang with any of those guys?
I rubbed shoulders with a lot of those guys.
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix came up and visited us, and
holy smokes,
in our dressing rooms, and we were all part of that. Southern California rock music scene at the time, but honestly, my heart was in the world of jazz. Because every night I'd go over and see Shelly Manne or Louis Hayes with Freddie Hubbard, or I saw the Miles Davis Bitches Brew Band with Jack and Dave in the rhythm section.
Yep.
And Chick, Wayne. So I was still pursuing a lot of my jazz passion, but I was but I was immersed in the rock world too. We played the Fillmore West, and we'd fly up to Detroit and play some gig there. We opened up for Dr. John.
Yeah. New Orleans.
I don't know how he got his doctorate, but whatever.
Start calling yourself doctor and you're Dr. John, I guess
you can.
Doctor of the New Orleans grooves, man.
Yeah. So, I was a jazz kid, but for a couple of years there, I was playing a lot of rock things.
Yeah.
But then when I moved back to Minneapolis, after I graduated from college, I totally immersed myself in the local jazz scene.
Yeah. Is that before you went to New York? So you went to New York after being in Minneapolis for a little while? Okay.
Yes. I was in New York in 73 and 74, pretty much.
Living there, playing full time, and just
mostly, Adam, I was mostly crashing on guys' couches.
Yeah.
Is what I was doing. But yes. and that's where I was taking lessons, and of course saturating myself in all the clubs every night,
right,
as much as I could.
Yeah, I always imagined that I would end up there or be there at some point, and I haven't. Yeah. I've played there a lot. I've toured there a lot.
Yeah,
but what's that energy like? Kind of being in the city, going to clubs, maybe going to jam sessions. Do you feel like that had a different energy than Hollywood, a different energy than Minneapolis?
Oh, absolutely.
Like more of a...
Yes. It's the city that never sleeps.
Yeah.
You know, what are you going to do? There's action and like 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
At least there was back in the 70s. You know, it was, and Manhattan was quite a bit grittier than it is now. It's gentrified, and you can hardly afford to live in Manhattan at this point.
Right.
And I was toying. I certainly was toying with the idea of moving there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there were two things that kept me from actually doing that. And number one, there's a genius on your instrument on every goddamn street corner in New York. Just a killer guy that's like leagues ahead of you.
Right.
And number two, I was already relatively in demand in Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Sure.
So I felt, well, I can play every night. Really, in those days, us guys, we all had 6-night-a-week gigs, and then would go to jam sessions after the gig, or another concert on a Sunday, you know, whatever. And so I thought I really wanted to be playing a lot, and there were good players here as well. Mm-hmm. It's just that they can't really advance your career as much as trying to, you know, get a gig with Brad Meldau,
right?
Or whoever whatever you're aiming for there. And so honestly, I felt like I'd rather be a big frog in a small pond,
sure,
than a Mr. Nothing in New York.
Yeah,
and it's absurdly expensive too.
Right.
And I didn't, you know, I've never had a lot of economic means.
Sure.
So there's that, you know.
Yeah.
And so that's, I mean, when you talk about making it in the music business, there's two dimensions to that. There's economic and there's musical.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and both of them are pretty darn important because they feed off of each other. They influence each other. And so, but honestly, I always kind of believed if you take care of the music will take care of you. Now, that means that you shouldn't believe that you need a brand new Lexus.
Right. Or so lifestyle is a part of it.
Exactly.
Right.
So you better be happy with eating peanut butter sandwiches, and that's cool.
Yeah.
And I've lived in 500 different band houses with other musicians, and you got to figure out who's going to clean the toilet, or somebody's raiding your shelf in the refrigerator. You know, all of that.
Sure.
So that's all part of it. But if you have enough determination, drive, and obsession and passion for doing this music, then you can do it. I mean, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always felt that way.
Yeah.
It's tough. Like the lifestyle thing's a tough pill to swallow. And one of my missions has been to go how can I maximize what I make on the music that I make? You know, it's like making original music.
Yeah.
Are there ways to, you know, I've been thinking a lot about sync licensing lately, and like getting my music into film and TV and commercials. And it's like, that can be a real chunk of change.
Yes, indeed.
And you guys, like, I imagine that there was a time in the cities, you're talking about 6 nights a week playing, where there was studio work too, and maybe you guys were even getting residuals. Like, what was that? Was that happening? Were you a part of that?
I did a little bit of that. A handful of jingles and commercials, yes. And once in a while, they'd pay into the Musicians Union Trust Fund, which was pretty darn handy. Because a lot of us, because that's set up pretty well, but for a lot of us jobbing guys that do casuals and myriad small-time gigs, that doesn't get paid into the fund. I mean, that fund is set up so that the guys in the studios get the residuals. Yep. The guys in the orchestras always do.
Yep.
And also shows. All the kind of theatrical shows,
right? Broadway stuff.
That's usually
theaters.
Those guys get their trust fund, their musicians' pension fund.
Yep.
Gets paid in. So I didn't really get in on a lot of that. Some of my peers have.
Yeah,
but,
right.
And good for them.
Sure. That's like a grind. That's almost like you're clocking your ticket. You're contributing to a 401k, and then you're like hoping you can retire or something. I did some of those shows, man, and like I did children's theater stuff. I did stuff. Well, we did a show with Joe Voss,
yes,
which was super fun. That was my first thing that was sort of like that.
Yeah.
And then later I got more stuff. I did like The Wiz, and I did Matilda at the Children's Theater.
Excellent.
And I got asked to do, right before we moved, I got asked to do a show at the Orway, and I was like, oh, it's happening. I played at the Guthrie a little bit. I subbed for both guys on West Side Story.
Yep.
And I could see the appeal, you know?
Yes.
It's like you're there, you got regular work, you got a paycheck coming in, you got money going into a fund that theoretically you'll be able to get back someday. But also, and not unlike teaching a lot, it takes a lot from you, you know? It takes a lot of your energy and time, and it becomes more like when I was doing those shows, I was almost like getting depressed because like, man, I'm playing the same music every night.
Yes, you
are. I'm a creative person. I want to be making creative music, and that's not what that is, you know?
Correct.
That's like a show up and execute. And then you, like from a trumpet playing standpoint, it becomes like, now this is the only thing I can play. It's like a weird, your body like ends up adapting to the show instead of being able to be flexible and move from thing to thing.
Rather than expressing yourself somehow in ways that you really would like to do.
Yeah. And that might be the path for some people, of course.
Absolutely.
Like some people want that, like regularity and consistency, but yeah, I always felt like that. Maybe I would dip my toes in that occasionally, but that wasn't really like the thing I wanted to do. You know?
That's my philosophy also. And even today, I end up turning down things that I don't think will actually interest me. And I'm not a wealthy guy at all, you know. I still have to eat my peanut butter sandwich. But the other thing, there's two other economic things here that I want to talk about just for a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
Number one, if you can at all afford to buy a house somewhere.
Yes.
And it's really difficult now, way more difficult than when I was younger and bought a couple of houses.
Mm-hmm.
And actually paying off the house. I mean, my wife and I paid off our place years ago, and that eliminates a big nut from our ledger.
Right.
The other thing is I don't have any kids.
Sure. That was a conscious decision, like a decision you both made together, or?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And God bless all of you that have children. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah.
I don't know how you balance your checkbook with children. But for me, that seemed such an obvious choice, given that I've wanted to pursue this lifestyle of playing creative music as much as possible for decades, and and I could see where that would be a pretty good size impediment to doing so.
Yeah, but it certainly makes decisions. You have to consider something else when you make decisions.
And
for sure.
I'm not being judgmental for anybody else, you know.
Yeah, so how then, you've been here a long time in the cities. You've seen the way things work in the music industry change many times over. Mm-hmm. How are things different now here in the cities? Let's just talk about gigging, like the gigging life. You're trying to make money, you know, playing 5-6 times a week if you can. I was certainly doing that here. I was playing all the time.
Yes.
Saying yes to everything, and over time would sort of be able to say no to some things, you know. But how have you seen things change? Is there a difference in the pay scale? Like, were you guys making more money compared to today, do you think, per gig? Have things changed in that way?
A little bit. Years ago, there were many more venues that had live music. So you could walk into a hotel lobby or a saloon somewhere, and there was always somebody playing, or singing with a band. Mm-hmm. And so I did that all through the 1970s, and all those things were 6 nights a week, and that has all evaporated. Partly because music is now so ubiquitous that it almost, to Joe average public, it almost is irrelevant.
Yeah.
In years past, and actually for millennia past, whenever there was live music, that meant that this event is special. You know, if it was a wedding or it was a dance, or your tribe got together to praise whatever deity they were praising, then all the drummers got together and everybody got into a trance, and that made it special.
Yeah.
And now everywhere you go on the planet, there's music playing behind you. So it's the specialness of having live music for an event is practically meaningless at this point, compared to what it used to be.
Right.
And so I understand that I understand that problem, but even so, given that problem, the creative music venues are always in flux. Mm-hmm. So these things pop up, and here today, gone tomorrow. Okay, that's fine.
Right.
But they're always a little something new. There's something else going on, or another situation where a lot of us guys still can play, and that's what I center myself on. I don't. I don't think it's any worse than it used to be for creative music, and honestly, I don't. But I'm in a lot of different bands and different musical situations, so I might. So I'm. It's nice to be able to do that, but
yeah. I mean, I imagine that like creative music was always sort of niche.
Yes,
and so in that way, it's like there are still people that want to hear that kind of music and like gather for it.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I think it's honestly, I think it's almost as healthy as it always has been.
Wow.
So there's a lot of our peers that grump about that, of course.
Yep.
But places are out there, and if you can't find a place that wants you, then you can start to try to develop a place. And I've my hat's off to a lot of people that are entrepreneurial enough to make a situation happen for them, where they can play the music that drives them.
Right. And that's really like locally, Artist Quarter was one of those spots,
Absolutely.
right? With Kenny Horst, who
Oh, yes.
What did he like? Did he create that place? Was that like his spot always, or did he buy it from somebody? Do you know?
Kenny has always been very ambitious about making a situation happen. I mean, there's been 3 Artist Quarters,
Right.
3 incarnations of the concept, and even before that, Kenny used to book a lot of different rooms around the Twin Cities.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it was all healthful, wonderful stuff. I used to go see Phil Wood's quintet somewhere with Tom Harrell.
Jeez.
Not at the Artist Quarter, at a place called Williams Pub on the corner of Lake and Hennepin. Anyway,
okay.
And there's about 15 other places too. So he's always been very dedicated toward that.
So he booked that band, that Phil Woods Quintet.
Oh, absolutely,
Wow.
yeah. And
Cool.
and I saw Cedar Walton with Sam Jones, Billy Higgins. No, Sam Jones wasn't on that gig. Might have been Williams. What's his name? Anyway, so that's proof that that you can invent a bit of a space or invent a bit of a venue.
Yeah, absolutely.
For yourself.
I think a lot of young musicians think about that now. They think about DIY spaces, home concerts.
Yes.
People put together whole tours of that kind of stuff. And I think a lot about like anchor gigs. So right now I'm in the middle of this trip where I'm doing a guest artist gig I just did a guest artist gig at University of Mary in Bismarck, and then Wednesday I leave to go do one in Fargo. So it's like two in North Dakota in the same week. And if I wanted to, it's like I could have gone like, okay, I have an excuse to be out here. Like I'm doing this with the podcast. I've got an excuse to be out here, so I'll spend a couple of days in Minneapolis. I'll do 2 days in the studio. I'll interview some people that I've wanted to talk to. But what I could do is go like, I'm going to bring my trio supercell and I'm going to supplement those smaller gigs with these like bigger chunks of money you can get from universities, right? Or like high schools or whatever. You do these like sort of educational clinic type things.
Yes.
Get a big chunk of change, use it as a anchor to be able to fund the rest of the thing. And for me, like academia has been really interesting because my school you're encouraged to go do these things because it's our professional development. It's our version of professional development, making new records, going on tours with bands, doing guest artist gigs. So they'll pay for the van and the gas for me to do a supercell tour, which just makes the whole thing work. It's like without having to pay for that stuff out of pocket, we can play whatever club we're able to book. We can put little tour runs together.
Right.
But yeah, it's like there are people that make their whole things off of this. Create your own scene, create a spot, even if it's not a traditional music venue,
Yes, that can be done. I've never really done it myself, but I have the most admiration for those guys that do that. Max Santiago did it at Jazz Central.
Yeah, Jazz Central.
And it's an age-old formula for doing this stuff.
I've said a long time too that
work.
Jazz Central was integral for me because that came around as I moved to this town.
Right.
And when I started my big band, we were the first big band to play there.
Excellent.
We played there every last Tuesday of the month for my first year of doing it.
Yeah.
Our first year and a half maybe, until we were over fire code and the fire marshal kicked us out. So we moved to the Artist Quarter.
Yeah.
We played a couple Tuesdays at the Artist Quarter right before it closed, and it was crushing, and we actually got paid. I could actually pay everybody a little bit of money because we got the whole door at the Artist Quarter, which is sort of unheard of.
Yes.
But Davis would be sitting there collecting cash, and I'd get a big wad of change, around $1,000 on a Tuesday, and it'd be like, man, I can pay my band, $50 a person.
What a rarity for a big band,
right, man? And it was just a great way to like develop as a performer, as a writer. It's like having that kind of space or these kinds of spaces is really invaluable for young artists.
Yeah.
You know. So let's talk, we're talking about creative music. Let's talk a little bit about your band with Bill Carruthers and Anthony Cox. I was just listening to your 2009 record a whole bunch. Mm-hmm. One that I sort of missed. I did never listen to it before the last few days when I reached out and was like, do you want to hang and talk? How did that band come about? You know, Anthony Cox and Bill Carruthers both have sort of like rubbed shoulders with some pretty huge names in the jazz industry.
Oh, absolutely.
Did you grew up in Minneapolis? Bill Carruthers is from Minnetonka, right? Like,
yes, and Anthony is from the metro area also.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. In the 70s, late 70s, Anthony and I lived together and played a whole handful of gigs around before he moved to New York. So we're old comrades in that sense, cool. Both musically and personally. And Bill, I started playing with Bill when he was in his late teens, I think. A lot of gigs around, and then he moved to New York, and so then at some point both guys were back in the cities, and so that's when I made my first record. I think we recorded that in 1996, and then after that, maybe most of 10 years later, in 2006, I made my second record, CD with those guys called Easy Company, and both those records, you know, they're still available, but they got some national press and a lot of decent reviews, and but I couldn't quite get both guys were busy doing a lot of things, so I couldn't quite put together enough touring in like either through the Midwest, or I couldn't put together enough touring to really get that off the ground.
Yeah, sure.
Is the thing, because it needed exactly what you were talking about. For instance, one college clinic, demonstration, exhibition, one clinic in the and then concert at night. It needed a couple of those from the colleges to be the linchpin for a handful of other gigs in the area. You know, I'm not telling anything new.
No, it's great. I love
just
hearing
said
it from
all this
people
stuff
too. Yeah.
You know, so then you can afford to travel.
Right.
And take care of transportation costs and rooms and meals, and still play a lot of little places that aren't going to pay you what you really deserve. Right. But that one or two gigs can kind of be the grounding, the main bullseye for your tour to finance it.
Yeah. So did you hire a publicist for those records? Is that how you got those reviews? Did you mail things out yourself?
I mailed everything on myself.
Yeah?
Yes,
Ooh,
of course.
Man. That's a lot of work. Do you feel like? So I've gotten maybe a little bit jaded surrounding this, but you know, I did my first couple of big band records and really just wanted to use the people in my band. I didn't want to bring somebody famous into the band to you know, put a name on the record or whatever. Right. Like a lot of people do. This is like a formula.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like, let's bring in Rich Perry to be a guest artist, and then I'll get Downbeat to review my record. I was like, my band has a personality. We've been spending every last Tuesday of the month playing for years in Jazz Central and Artist Quarter. Yeah. Like, this should be the band that records. This should be the band that's featured. We have a personality as a band. And my first record did well. Like, somehow a guy at iTunes found it and listed it as one of the best jazz releases of 2014, which was really cool. And I did hire a publicist to like try and get some reviews. There was some small things. It wasn't, nobody like Downbeat or Jazz Times has really ever acknowledged that I exist. And I think it's because I've acted in this way. Do you think that having Anthony and Bill because of them being in New York City? Did that help? Did people recognize their names when you sent stuff out? Was that a factor, or were you just like, it was the music and the music was great and that was all it needed?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it was much of a factor, honestly, because these so many of these reviewers get inundated with like 57 albums every day.
Yep.
You know, with name guys on it. So
Right.
I don't know if that really helped with getting good reviews or not. Although I've done a handful of tours in Europe with Crothers, and I did talk with people there that were interested in that trio.
Cool.
So that, you know, but maybe not interested enough or didn't have the connections enough for me to make a European tour happening. But
how do those Europe tours happen? Are those Europe gigs? You played a little in Europe. Was those festival gigs?
yeah.
Okay.
No, excuse me. Some were festival gigs, but then augmented with the other smaller jazz club venues in Paris or Brussels, or Milan, wherever we were.
Did you find that over there, the audiences were more receptive, promoters were more active in promoting the shows? Like, that's certainly been my experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, in Europe and Japan, the audiences there are much more accepting and attentive and appreciative than the classic American audience, I think. And so even though you're bringing a little something new to them, they still recognize that you are there as an artist, expounding or emanating whatever stuff is in your heart and soul, and they respect that artistry or that commitment to the art. And the same thing about Japan. I've never toured Japan, but from a lot of our peers that have been there, I hear similar kinds of anecdotes.
Yes, I've heard that as well. Yeah, and there's like these hotel gigs you can get, and they'll put you up, and you could be there for 6 months playing every day. And it's pretty interesting. Jan and I have been just recently. We've been like, should we move to Europe? You know, it's like we're already kind of out in the woods in the UP. It's you know, it wouldn't be that crazy, you know, and it'd be an adventure. And our boys are still young, and it's like they could learn a new language pretty fast.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And there's an audience over there, and a couple American jazz musicians move over.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
We've considered it. Okay, cool. I've got a couple like rapid fires.
Okay.
To ask you.
Sure.
So it's let's go with, what's the secret to a long and committed relationship as a musician? You
with your sweetheart?
With your sweetheart.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
It's well, I've been in one. I'm in one now.
Yes.
It's just delightful when you find your soulmate. I think it's as you know, the word love. You could say, well, yeah, you have to really love each other, but it's also respecting the other person's drives and what they need to do in life. And so it's that kind of give and take where it's the amount of respect that you can give each other for allowing the other person to be free enough to live their own life and have their own schedule. That is really of the most importance. We personally, we had my wife's mother and father living with us for 10 years. They passed away a year ago. So in my house, here's my mother-in-law and my father-in-law living right here at this very table, never leaving. And so this went on for 10 years, and we were caretakers for 10 years. And the most wondrous thing is that my wife never once said, Jay, I don't want you to take that gig because we got to do something with Mom and Dad. Or, can't you doing another rehearsal here at the house tomorrow? There was not once in 10 years' time did that living situation ever nudge out my schedule for pursuing this life of music that I've been doing for decades.
That's awesome.
And so I'm very blessed for that. Anyway, that's just one little anecdote for if you find the right person in life that is generous enough and unselfish enough to give you that. Wow, that's worth its weight in gold, ain't it?
Yeah, man. Big time.
So that's all I know is you gotta take care of your relationships too. You know.
Yeah.
They don't just magically appear, and you have a good time in the bedroom, and you go out, and life is a big, wondrous garden of pleasures and delight.
Right.
But there's a lot of little work things. I mean, you have to figure out which one of you is going to clean the toilets. Who's it going to be?
Yeah.
You take turns? Right. It's like there's a lot of that negotiating, and that's all part of keeping a balanced relationship happening year after year.
Right. Cool. Okay. Desert Island time. So
good.
What are your Desert Island albums? And one of them has to be yours. So let's maybe do like 3 records, and then one of them's yours.
That I made?
One of them's a record that you made or that you're on, and 2 or 3 others that you're allowed to bring along.
Of course. I really love my record. The first CD I made with Crothers and Anthony Cox called Long Ago. That has a nice amalgam of kind of some loose things, but some really wondrous swinging things too. And both guys are like absurdly brilliant on it, and so that feels good. But there's the first album I have to take along with me is Now He Sings, Now He Sobs, Chick Corea, Miroslav, Roy Haynes.
Yeah.
For any drummer, I consider that trio, and particularly Roy's playing, as the Bible. That's the Bible for me. Other than that, you'd want you could use Wes Montgomery and Wynton Kelly Trio, Smoking at the Half Note, because it's so absurdly swinging, and there's nothing wrong with. For a totally different mood is Coltrane's Ballads.
Oh yeah.
And that if that isn't enough to make you cry in the middle of the night, then your heart isn't beating. Luckily, as a kid, I was lucky enough to see the Coltrane Quartet in 64 or 65.
I think I've read your story on this.
Yeah.
I would love it if you would tell that, because it's just like the way you say it, like you're shooting daggers through my heart. It was like,
Yes,
you know, like
that. That's what it did. So I've been listening to. I think I was 17, senior in high school, and I've been playing jazz for a few years with my all my young comrades, and I've been listening to Coltrane and Miles, of course, and I loved at that time live at the Village Vanguard, and obviously as a drummer you have to deal with Elvin.
Yep.
At some point you got to go, this is quite something. Mm-hmm. I want to get near this, and I loved Coltrane. Just loved him. He spoke right to me. Anyway, we go. One of my other jazz pals and I drive up 120 miles to see him at the Guthrie Theater.
Yeah.
And for 2 hours, I was absolutely mesmerized and enchanted. And in fact, I was. It was. I felt like I had never seen or heard music like that, and I was already familiar with Coltrane's playing.
Yeah.
And Elvin, and McCoy. I'd already listened to him on myriad albums, and yet to be in the same room. It was like I was like in the middle of I was like I was standing on the seashore watching a tidal wave come at me while there's a hurricane above me, and I'm feeling an earthquake underneath me. And it was just tremendous. It was more than the volume or intensity.
Right.
There was something spiritual about that particularly from Train. I thought Train was speaking directly to me. Now, this is an audience of 500 people or something.
Yeah.
And I thought Train was speaking. I thought he was my brother or my father or all the people that knew me in life, and he knew all about my foibles. He knew about my girlfriend problems. He knew about my bad grades. He knew about my wanting to fix my car. He knew about my warts or my bad hair. Anything. He knew everything about my life, and he was speaking directly to me. I'd never felt that from a musician before, ever in my life, and not quite ever since.
Yeah.
It was I had an epiphany, Adam. Seriously, I had an epiphany that this was so important. What he was saying to me was so important that I had to be part of something that he was talking about. I had to be part of that music.
Yeah. Wow.
And that blew me away even more than Elvin. And as a drummer, I'm watching, oh my God, I'm seeing this gigantic icon
Yep.
do things that I never even imagined. And yet, Train made me realize I have to commit my life to this thing that we do.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more important than that.
Man, that's beautiful.
And I'm still there.
It's amazing.
Seriously, I was just practicing this morning before you came over.
Yeah.
I'm in the shed every day.
Yeah.
Just trying to hone a few things and keep all of my licks together that I already know. But but trying to push myself a little bit too all the time.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Yeah, I left. I was at a different school my first year of college, and Jana gave me a Love Supreme. I hadn't really listened to that,
Okay.
We had just started dating, and she bought me this book that Ashley Kahn did on the making of the record. And
yeah.
I started listening to the album, and I hadn't heard anything like that before. And at first I was like, I don't understand this.
Right.
I'm not into it.
Yeah.
And then I listened to it again and again and again and again, and it slowly became one of my all-time, if not my all-time favorite record. And I transferred schools. I mean, I was literally I was at school to do something else. I did my whole life. I wanted to major in music. Somebody in high school told me I should go to school to be a pastor for church.
Okay.
Because I was a charismatic person. I was sociable, and if you're a young person and you go to youth group and you're a charismatic person, they say you're supposed to be a pastor, and then you believe them because you're 16 years old.
Yep.
And so I was at a school to do that and to do a trumpet performance degree, and I heard that record, and that was sort of like my permission, because that's like his dedication to God. He's got all this. It's very spiritual.
Yes.
And it was almost like permission for me to go, you know what, I'm not supposed to be doing this other thing.
Yes.
It was it was very quickly apparent when I got to the wrong school. It was very quickly apparent. So within a couple of months, I was applying at other schools, and I ended up going and studying with Fred Sturm at Lawrence and doing a jazz degree there. But it was that record, it was Train. It was like that voice that was just like piercing my, it was like,
I've heard similar stories about Train doing that to a lot of us guys.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
There's something there that is so magnetic and so magical to those of us that can hear it. Other people, and nowadays there's so many guys that are such brilliant technicians. You got a guy like Michael Brecker, or a guy Chris Potter. These guys, George Garzone. These guys are phenomenal players.
Yep.
But Train was the groundbreaking guy to go in that direction and influence all of those guys.
Yep.
And he still does that to me.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go, wow, I can't deny this.
Right. I wonder how, where does that come from? Where does that ability to speak to people through instrumental music in a really deep way? I mean, all the people you mentioned, Brecker and Chris Potter, it's like they all have that ability to some degree.
Absolutely.
But not in the same way, right?
Right.
As Train.
Yeah.
It's like in that book, I remember reading that Elvin Jones, when he brought the Love Supreme music to the band, Elvin Jones was remembering that he told them, in order for this to work, we have to play like we're willing to die for each other. There was that, and there's that. It's like listening to that record, and just like thinking about that, man, it's like so cool.
Really? Yeah. Well, I like that kind of powerful commitment, and there's a handful of players that I get to do something with. Luckily, even at this point in my life, where I get to snuggle up against. Or snuggle up to somebody else on the bandstand that actually has that. I just did that last night with Dean McGraw.
Oh man, yeah.
And he's got that. And there's a lot of guys that have that kind of that kind of commitment and that kind of flavor to their psyche. Thankfully, right. Doesn't that keep us alive?
Hell yeah.
Rather than just going out and playing a gig for a bunch of yahoos in suits at a country club.
Right. Right. Okay. Man, all right. So one more.
Sure. let's put Love Supreme on the desert island.
All right, yes.
Of course.
That's definitely one of mine.
Sorry.
So you haven't done a lot of teaching throughout your life. Here's an opportunity for young people that are getting started in music. Do you have any advice? What would your advice be? Somebody starting out today.
Number one, we all have to practice our scales and rudiments. We all have to do that. So I'd say, particularly when you're starting out, I'd say your metronome better be your best friend. Let's make that our best pal.
Yeah.
Because without tolerably decent time, you're screwed.
Yes.
You know what? Nobody wants to play with a guy who's either lethargic or wishy-washy or too aggressive and trying to spit out a whole bunch of notes out of his mouth. Nobody wants to deal with that. I mean, very few people, So you and the metronome should be that's your Siamese brother there.
Yeah.
That's your twin there. You should just get right next to him. That is number one. Number two is, if you're interested in this music, you better listen to it every day of your life. You hear something playing in the background right now?
Yep.
Yeah, that's an internet radio station called the Oscar Peterson Channel. That plays Oscar Peterson 24 hours a fucking day with no commercials.
Yeah.
Is that okay? I mean, it's just let's infuse our lives with the music that we're interested in all the time.
Yeah.
And that's I think listening to the great masters that really interest you and that really means something to you. I think that's severely important. Number three, that's number two. Number three is you got to be playing with a lot of human beings. And so you'll figure out, so that you can figure out, what's this guy got? How does he approach this music? Yeah. Now we all can play on Green Dolphin Street, okay? But how come a lot of musicians play that tune? Well, and how do they make it different? When you hear Bill Evans play that tune,
yep,
it's different from Sonny Rollins playing the tune, or there's something. Each guy brings a little something different to Green Dolphin Street or whatever, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. And Viva la Difference. That's, you have to figure out, there's lots of ways of playing the blues. I mean, you could be Ornette Coleman and play the blues, or you could be B.B. King and play the blues.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Or it could be Monk.
Yeah.
Or Chick Corea. There's so much to learn here. Just considering the different pathways that these guys find and present a way of playing. And so that's really important for you to figure out too.
Yeah.
That they're each of us have a little different approach to how we're going to do this music. And some of it works and some of it's BS.
Sure.
And you got to be able to kind of hone into that a little bit and figure that out.
Self-awareness. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the other thing, is playing with as many people as possible, rather than just 3 or 4 of your really good buddies that are really good players. Okay, that's cool. That's fine.
Yep.
But there's a whole universe of other spirits out there that you got to know, or that's important for you to know. Oh, what does this guy bring to the whole thing? Is he earth or water or fire or air?
Yeah.
Which direction is this? And how valid is it to what I want to be doing? So, and that's the wondrous thing about playing this genre, is that we can all find a way to express ourselves, whether it's Ornette or B.B. King. These
Yes.
are very divergent kinds of things there, but it's still, both of them are valid.
Right.
So I think that's of all. What did I just name? 3 or 4 things there.
Yeah. No, it was perfect. 3 things. Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes too for those of you that want to remember those 3 things. Okay. And we'll put Jay's Desert Island Records in the show notes.
And put in that we shouldn't be paying for expensive meals at restaurants and expensive whiskey either, because you need money for your rent and for your car maintenance and
yeah, man,
for the basics in life. Because be careful with your money.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm a penurious guy, and that's the way I can exist and play this music for decades.
Yeah. Thank you for your wisdom.
Okay.
Dude, I said you weren't a teacher, but when I moved to town, when Evan moved to town, when Brian moved to town, you were super always down to play with us, and I felt a lot
guys,
like,
yeah.
We would come to your house sometimes and rehearse here, and we appreciated that you were always down to hang and play, and we learned a lot. So thank you.
Good.
Yeah, man. We did it. Thanks so much for listening to my conversation with Jay Epstein. If you dig the show, please send it to a friend. Just copy the link, paste it into a text message. It's the best way to spread the show and to help it grow. The other best way is to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. So if there's a little plus sign, you can hit that. If it says subscribe, hit subscribe. We've got a YouTube channel called How Musicians Make It. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening. We got more episodes coming. See you soon. Peace.